Hello, welcome to Teens Talk Politics. I'm Richard Colwell.
And I'm Michaela Kells.
And today we're sitting down with the President of Nicolet Bank, Bob Atwell.
Good morning.
Good morning.
It's nice to have you here.
Yeah.
So our first question is, it can be said banks rely on the government for charter privileges and the government relies on banks to keep a healthy economy. How significant is the relationship of banks and the U.S. government, and why is it important for all banks to maintain that relationship?
The relationship between banks and the federal government and governmental entities in general, but the federal government in particular, is inevitably intertwined. And it really starts with the fact that the federal government creates the currency and through a variety of policies and agencies maintains that currency for multiple purposes. It wants to support a medium of exchange, and banks are frankly the principal way through which money, or the policy towards money, is implemented. So we're a means of federal policy. At the same time, we as banks are dependent on various federal agencies for support. FDIC, for example, a federal agency funded by the banks, but to maintain insurance coverage so that depositors trust the security of the system. So there is in some ways almost no clear separation between the banks and the government. The government needs the banks need the government.
All right. Our next question is, how do you feel about a portion of each taxpayer's paycheck having to go towards bailing banks out? And what are the pros and cons to the bailout?
Well, first of all, I don't think it's accurate to say that people's paychecks went directly to bail out banks. That certainly wasn't the case with TARP, the TARP program. The TARP program actually in the end wound up being self-funding.
What is the TARP program?
The Troubled Asset Relief Program, which was implemented, was one of the means by which the federal government stabilized or sought to stabilize the financial system in the heart of the crisis. So what they did was invest capital into the banks, not just money, but capital, which is somewhat different, and you had to repay it. So for instance, our bank received $15 million and paid back $18 million probably 2 years later. So, however, the thrust of the question, while I wouldn't say it's accurate to say people's paychecks directly went to bail out banks, we know the full faith and credit of the United States government was put behind basically the entire financial system, including banks, investment banks, insurance companies, and auto companies through a sweeping set of federal actions. So I think it is accurate to say that the American public had to intervene with its full faith and credit, which is backed by their ability to tax consumers. So indirectly I would say we did bail out not just banks, the whole economy. We were in that dire a shape. So AIG, large insurance company, some of the investment banks were allowed to fail, Lehman Brothers for example. Others were made banks, bank holding companies literally overnight. Goldman Sachs for instance, Morgan Stanley for instance too. So there was a bailout. It didn't come directly out of the paychecks of the citizens, at least not yet. But we nationalized the risk in the financial system during the heart of the crisis, and it's I think accurate to say I don't think we've successfully unnationalized it.
All right, so our next question is, Nicolet is obviously a commercial bank, so what is the difference between a commercial bank and an investment bank, and what do these different types of banks do?
So I would say a commercial bank is more of a pure intermediary. If you look at Nicolet Bank, for instance, if you look at the three main components of our balance sheet, our assets, which are loans to businesses and individuals. Our deposits are the money that our customers entrust to us to keep safe, and then our equity. We're not only a commercial bank, a pure community bank in that we're owned by people in Taylor County and Brown County, soon to be Door County, predominantly owned in the markets that we serve. So you could say we're almost a for-profit co-op that has no reason to exist other than to serve these markets in a manner that's profitable and provides a return to the people who own us, who are us. So it's a true financial intermediary. An investment bank typically, first of all, deals with different types of instruments. It underwrites and distributes equity and debt investments to a much broader public. So I would say it's much more transactional, much less invested in long-term relationships, and I would say much more financial in its orientation. I mean, a good community bank, we're always trying to look at what are the activities that our customers are doing, and how does it affect our communities, what are the long-term ramifications of the decisions and investments that people make, and the decisions that we make. So we're very relational as commercial banks, particularly the more community bank oriented is going to be, very attentive, should be very attentive to the community around it. Investment banks are transactional. They make their money on getting deals done. We make our money on having people do, effective things in the money they borrow from us, and in the process they support the work of people who live in the communities we serve.
All right. In light of new technologies, we've seen a threatening of the safety of cybersecurity. How has this affected Nicolet Bank specifically?
Well, I think cybersecurity is a huge topic, not only for banks, but I think particularly within banks, because if bad things happen if hackers hack into a manufacturing company. They can find trade secrets, they can get customer lists, they can understand the inner workings of the company, they can get customer information and things like that. With a bank, the danger is much more immediate because you're dealing with the flow of funds. If someone captures, for example, the identity of one of our corporate customers that has substantial deposits in the bank, and successfully initiates a fraudulent wire transfer, that can happen in a matter of minutes. So the cybersecurity threat is much more immediate in the financial system, and there's a lot of people justifiably very concerned about it. And it's very hard, unlike if somebody robs a bank directly, they come in here, they give a note, they come in and they show a gun, give them your money, they walk out of here with $2,500, and they have, I think, about a 30% chance of being caught, and if they're caught, they're going to spend serious time in the big house. If somebody attempts to break into the bank and take money or take something fraudulently electronically, they might be in Africa, they might be in Russia, they might be in Indonesia, they might be in the United States, but there's really very little, if any, risk to the perpetrator of online financial fraud. It's the legal system's ability to really track those people down and bring negative consequences to the attempt is just almost not there. So you literally have people who just kind of keep probing and trying to penetrate the firewalls of financial institutions. So.
As a bank, what have you done to just try to prevent these types of cybersecurity, like hacking and stuff?
Yeah, well, we do all kinds of things. We have a very solid firewall, but we do attempt to penetrate our own firewall. We'll hire somebody to try to hack into our system. And then the other thing we're trying to do is really educate our customers, which is hard. And frankly, we think the greatest risk of financial fraud comes through our customers, because we see these circumstances where your AOL account on your home computer gets broken into, and they're very sophisticated anymore. They go in there, they look all around at everything. They might not do anything. They might just look for a couple months at you, understand where your bank accounts are, kind of get the language, who's the people you interact with, and so through your system they create a dialogue mimicking your voice to attempt the bank to do a fraudulent transaction that benefits them. And so we try to educate the public. We do. I mean, we've had a series of meetings recently here with our commercial customers to invite them in, and have them understand that here's what can actually happen, and it does happen. So, we just try to be vigilant about the actual IT infrastructure, the firewall aspect, but the social engineering through our own people and then through our customers is really, seemingly where the greatest threat is now.
All right, so our last question is, what do you feel is the biggest problem facing the youth today?
Well, you're asking a direct question, so I'm going to give you a real answer. When I look at the kinds of problems that we face in the communities that we serve, and we do spend a lot of time trying to understand them and try to reflect back to the community what to do about it, we're involved in a lot of things that involve remediation of lives that are, where suffering's already in play. When I try to push down to the root of the problem now in each of these instances, whether it's foster care, family violence, drugs, alcohol, what I see at the root of all that is a very sad and deep decline in the health of family life. And that I literally think a lot of youth really don't experience relationships of sincere affection, love, self-sacrifice modeled in their own families, and they don't really learn how to understand, appreciate, serve, and draw strength from people around them. So the sense of community, the strength of the family, that's what lies at the heart of all these things, and the consequences are a search for meaning and a search for meaning where it can't be found, and a loss of hope in the future. So I'm very sympathetic to the struggles that youth have in that regard, and frankly, not just youth, older people too. I mean, there's a coarseness to culture and a separation of people, a loss of a sense of community, and not a really deep understanding of how to appreciate other people even when you disagree with them. And so how do you get on in the life together that's really essential to the future of our not just our country, but really the communities that our country is comprised of. And the effort to mitigate problems through excessive federal, state, governmental control is understandable, but ultimately going to be highly ineffective because there's no law or social program that can substitute for the lack of love that fails, doesn't flow from human hearts. So that's my answer.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.